Uzķēršam, preparējam, aizšujam. Tāda ir mēdīju anatomija.
Žurnālisti bieži vien ir pārāk slinki, lai cīnītos par piekļuvi patiesībai. Tā saka poļu režisori Agņeska Holanda, kuras jaunākā filma Zaļā, robeža īsu brīdi skatām uz Latvijas kino ekrāniem. Filmas sižets tikpat labi varētu risināties Latvijā. Stāsts sākas uz Baltkrievijas robežas, kuru mēģina šķērsot bēgļu grupa, kas kļuvuši par instrumentiem Putina un Lukašenko hibrīdkarā ar Eiropu. Kāpēc un kā tapa šī filma par bēgļu krīzi? Par to šajā mēdīju anatomijā es, Zane Ozoliņa, runāju ar filmas režisori Agņešku Holandu.
As I've heard that you were watching the politicians denying access to the border and decided if you don't want us to see what is happening, I'm going to show it.
Yeah, this was the main personal filmmaking motivation. When the crisis started, I knew, of course, that that is the way Putin and Lukashenko try to destabilize the borders and the political situation in the European Union, using the refugees and migrants who are searching for the new corridors to enter the paradise we are living in so far. But and they used the migrants and the refugees as some kind of the weapons, without totally cynically, without any consideration about their human rights or their interests and so on. And I realized that the Polish government immediately responded in a similar way. It means they started to use the situation and the people who've been somehow victims of that provocation for their own electoral and political means. It means they created the atmosphere of the imminent danger of the attacks, dehumanized those people, telling that they are all terrorists, pedophiles, zoophiles, and so on, and closing quite large zone around of the border to the humanitarian organizations, to the medical organizations, and to all medias. And the pushbacks, which have been legalized by the Polish government against the international law and against Polish constitution, started immediately. And I realized that it becomes somehow the laboratory of the lie, of the propaganda and cruelty, and that the humans' lives, the humans' individual dreams, needs, desires, dignity doesn't matter to anyone. And I did enough of films about 30s and 40s of 20th century to know that if you open the way to that kind of the dehumanization of some race group or national group or any group of the people, it's going down the hill, and the consequences, moral consequences, political consequences, and legal consequences are enormous. So I wanted to give the voice to those who became voiceless by the propaganda from both sides, and give them the faces to show the human dimension of that crisis and of those choices. And on the other hand, I decided that it will be important to show the different perspective on that crisis. I didn't use the political or geopolitical perspective because it's quite obvious and is very present in the official medias and official statements. I wanted to show in the first place the perspective of the refugees, the perspective of the activists who are saving our humanity on one side, and on another side they becomes also the victims of the persecutions and hate speeches coming from the top, and the border guards who suddenly, Polish border guards who've been educated as the guardians of the border and very respected among the population, and suddenly they receive the tasks which they've been not trained for. And the costs, the psychological costs and the moral cost they are paying for that, it's also quite high. So so it's what was my goal to try to capture the totality, or the widest possible spectrum of the individuals and groups who are involved. And in the same time, I know that it is Polish problem, it is a Latvian problem, Lithuanian, because that are the borders which been used by Lukashenko to create that crisis. The Finnish borders now also, but in general, the borders of the all rich world. It means all European exterior borders and American borders with the South, Australian borders, and so on and so on. And that the only reaction to the growing migration issue is the hate, the nationalism, the racism, and the wars. It's not extremely efficient, I think, on the long terms. It's not only inhuman, but it's also not very efficient. I think that most of those people who decide to take the boat and go through Mediterranean or to the Canal La Manche, they know that they can die, but it's not something which is stopping them.
Yes, and so many politicians or society in general doesn't try to feel empathy of this, which is surprisingly for me as a Latvian, because we have this long history of us being refugees. How do you feel it? Why doesn't it resonate with Baltics, with Poles? Because we have been in the same place just a few decades ago.
We've seen, and you can see it in the Green Border as well, how spontaneous and massive was the positive response to the Ukrainian refugees. It means, the Poles identified it immediately with the Ukrainian refugees. It's much more difficult for them, and to identify with the people coming from the faraway countries with the different color of skin and so. And it's not only racism, it's also the ignorance, and it's also the responsibility of the politicians is enormous here. When in 2015, before the elections in Poland, which finally was won by Mr. Kaczynski and Law and Justice, it means nationalistic, populist, right-wing party, they've been using very efficiently the refugee crisis because of the war in Syria, and they've been using to wake up the fears and the hate among the population, the most outrageous words and figures, speaking about the refugees spreading the microbes and parasites, and using practically the Nazi language. And the efficiency of the propaganda was shown by the statistics. 3 months or 4 months before the elections, 67 or 68% of the population was for helping and receiving the refugees from the war in Syria. After that massive propaganda, a few months later, it was only 30%. And we know exactly from 30s of 20th century that kind of the propaganda can be very efficient. And we know it from war in Rwanda. We know it. So when the politicians are using that kind of the tool in order to gain the power and please some part of the population, they know very well that they are waking up the demons. But they are doing that because their perspective is not the perspective of decennies. Their perspective is the perspective of the closest elections. And as long as we are supporting that kind of the politicians, it will go to that direction. I don't see the reason to stop it if we are not changing our attitude. I mean, the societies and the media.
In your film Green Border, you are telling the story of the refugees, of the border guards, and of activists. How did you find the true stories are not being told? Like there's no memory, no books, no diaries yet, because it's the present continues.
I invited two the co-writers, one who is a professional screenwriter with a big experience, and he's an activist himself. And another is a young woman who wrote like 2 scripts before, and who is a mother of 2 young children. And her husband is a doctor who created the organization Medics on the Border. He'd been personally going to the border and helping, the people in very precarious situations sometimes. So they had already their own experiences, and we did very wide research. It was, on the beginning, it was a lot of articles and, and videos even, coming from not directly from the border, but from the, from the different situations. So, and a lot of testimonies, a lot of statements. And we've been talking to everyone we've been able to talk and collected it. It was a mountain of material. So our main goal was to select those who are the most relevant and the most powerful in the same time. And it was very intense work, but quite fast, because in 3 months practically we got the script. After the 1 year took us to collect the money, but it was the fastest made feature film of that kind I did in my lifetime. So yes, it wasn't the books, it was the life who was inspiring us. But in the same time, I was political emigre in 80s in France, and with the like woman alone with the young child, and it was much easier for me to exactly understand the psychological situation of those people who are doing everything. Of course, my situation was not so dramatic. I was Polish citizen, and the filmmaker in France, and not the Syrian refugee on the Polish-Belarusian border. But when I was talking to my actors, Syrian actors living in France and Belgium, but recently they escaped from Syria and they know it very well. We found so much in common that it was somehow, it was really easy to me to write that part.
You also have this part, Julia, which for me a little bit was associated, if in Latvian it would be Ieva. As I think from our colleagues, that Ieva Robiška is our activist who is now being on trial and maybe possibly facing even a jail time. In your film, Julia is a lonely woman who has lost her loved one, her husband. And how do you feel the activism? How does it come from? Sometimes it feels like there are some, it has to be something beyond normal to drop everything and risk yourself and just risk your reputation, your life, your regular sleep to help others.
Yeah, it is a big mystery. I think that we know a lot, and the art is dealing a lot with the evil. It's much more difficult to speak about the good. And I don't have the simple answer how it is and why several people has some kind of the gene of empathy and justice, and they just have to do it. And there are many, they are not like few. Only few are doing it not only spontaneously on the occasion, but they are like doing it as a part of the mission. And yes, they are strange, they are different, and they are dangerous to the state, because the state doesn't like the human rights or human well-being go over the political interests. But they are actually the salt of the earth. It's because of them that our humanity is saved and was saved in the past. several times.
How do you think why it's so different when we are looking at people are watching your film and so many criticism has come over your head and from the politicians as well, but you have made several films also to make the audience think about the Holocaust. For example, in Darkness, about a man who was hiding people in the sewer system. And we are moved by these stories. But if we are telling about people helping refugees nowadays, then he would rather be criticized for being for putting the state in danger.
Well, it depends really. The reaction to my film is a lot of hate, especially the organized hate coming from the politicians. And it was before the election, so they hoped also to make the profit, by organizing the hate campaign against myself and our film. But I had a lot of incredibly moving and positive reactions. In Poland, movie had over 800 viewers during a few weeks, and if I count after the VOD and so on, I think that it was way over the million. And most of the people who watched the film have been moved, and moved in very, strong way, with the tears coming through and with the long silence after the screening and long conversations after, which somehow felt like the collective therapy. And I experienced not only in Poland, but in all countries we've been showing the film. We can wake up, at least among certain viewers, the gene of the empathy and the reflection, who we are as human beings, where we are going.
And that is also the subject you have talked about your movies previously as well. And I wanted to touch also about Mr. Jones. And could you see the similarities here when in the 30s, a Pulitzer awarded journalist would be denying atrocities happening to Ukrainians then in Holodomor? And now, what is the role of journalists?
Well, I think that, on one hand, you have still a lot of incredibly courageous, brave and independent journalism and investigative journalism, even in the countries which are half authoritarian or at least led by the populist governments who are aiming the free press and media. On the other hand, they are too lazy, I think, and not enough fighting for the access to the facts. And for example, the big disappointment about Polish journalists was when that zone around of the border had been closed by the authorities and the access to media was revoked, was forbidden. They didn't try. They didn't go. They accepted. Okay, it's I cannot turn to the right. I'm not turning to the right, and I think that was a sin, and somehow it deprived them on the moral force to report another decisions and the decisions of the current government. But the biggest, I had some speeches recently because I became the woman or man or whatever, a woman of year for the Polish newspapers Gazeta Wyborcza, and when I was talking there, I told that to me the biggest enemy of the contemporary journalism is not only the internet and social media and artificial intelligence, which is income, but the populism and the polarization, and that it was the subject of Mr. Jones, a part of the Holodomor, which was of course the main subject of the film. It was the situation of the journalists who believe that to serve some political agenda they consider important or right, they are able to totally destroy the facts and create the fake news. And unfortunately, that tendency exists on both sides, on the sides of the democratic press and on the sides of right-wing or fascist press. And it's not the symmetry here. I know that the reasons are different and also the efforts are different, but it is very real danger, because it means living in the polarized society. We are losing the half of our possible interlocutor.
Do you think there is a solution, an exit? Is there a way journalists could come back to their roots and the essence of the work to make it?
They have to. They have to, because without the free press or media who are reporting the truth, investigating and reporting the facts and the truth, the democracy cannot survive. I think that is like the first pillar of the democracy. And second is the politicians who are courageous, who are not like totally corrupted by the desire to keep the power on all price. And third is to wake up of the public opinion. But all is connected. But the first thing is to me are medias.
How do you think, after watching your film, are there some journalists in Poland who maybe have made up their mind? Oh no, I have to go there, because it's still going on. I have to go there and try to get on the border and get the right story out.
Well, maybe some, but I'm afraid that they thought, okay, Agnieszka Holland made the work, and now we can go. We can pass it and go on. And I am here to to remind them constantly that it's not over.
I have watched one of the Q&As after the movie, which has been put on the YouTube, I think after the New York Film Festival. And you also made a connection about the Vietnam War, that until the journalists were reporting the actual picture there, then the politicians would tell their own narrative as they would like.
That was one of the inspirations for me. It was the statement of Mr. Kaczynski, the ruler of the leading the party, who've been like the creator of the decisions, political decisions concerning the propaganda decisions concerning the refugees. And after they locked that quiet white territory, and forbid the access to the media, he said that America lost the war in Vietnam because they let media to go there. And it means it was for me the sign that he believed, and it's true somehow, when an American public opinion watched the images of the burned children, and especially that iconic image of the little naked girl burned by napalm, who is running and crying. It made the huge impact on the change of the opinion. They said, we don't want that war. We don't want to be there. So he was right, but it showed me that he believed in the power of the images. And I said, okay, that is a good reason for me. You are afraid of the images. You want to censor the images, and I am able to create the images which has that power.
Aren't you sometimes a little bit afraid about how your historical films sometimes repeat themselves nowadays? What I would mean, one example, that Evan Greshkovich, the American journalist, is now accused of spying and being jailed in Moscow, which is the same accusation from the Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I'm somehow I was doing that historical films because I felt that they are relevant and certainly may become very soon relevant if we will not take the precautions. And unfortunately, we are not taking precautions. So the history didn't stop. And I considered, that the Second World War and especially the experiences of the mass crimes and the crimes against humanity and Holocaust was somehow, the vaccination against nationalism and racism. And the Europe decided that never again, and the unification of Europe, which went slowly but surely during the like 50 years after the Second World War. It was the response to that experience. And that vaccination, unfortunately, started to evaporate. And it started, to me, on the beginning of 21st century, especially after September 11. And it became clear to me that the brown and dark forces are waking up and that they can take over, and that nationalism or racism is not taboo anymore, even to the most civilized democratic societies, and that that we can see again coming from Russia, coming from different directions, that evil waking up.
You also mentioned the hate speech you have received after the Green Border was released, and you even had 2 bodyguards accompanying you for the screenings in Poland. How do you feel safe now, and would you ever had imagined that a filmmaker would be in danger because of a film, of the work, of artwork?
Many filmmakers have been in danger before. Now in Cannes, they welcomed Mahmoud Rasool, Iranian filmmaker who been sentenced to 8 years in jail. So, yeah, it is possible. I didn't imagine that it's possible in the democratic country, the part of European Union. And I expected the hate coming after, Green Border. But I thought that they will use that the government, the people, politicians will use the media to spread, and social media to spread it. I didn't believe that the personal, prime minister, president of the country, minister of justice, etc., that they took such a, outrageous number of terrible accusations and hate speeches. So that it was a bit surprise. But, when the devaluation of the words made that anything is possible to say by anybody, the accusation of being, Russian, German, I don't know what spy, to being, the hate, the traitor of the country, etc. They are every day are in the parliament. You can hear that kind of the accusation. So you can tell whatever without paying for that. But unfortunately, after it goes to some fertile ground, and you always can find some destabilized or fanatic person who will translate that words to the acts, as it happened in Poland against the primator of Gdańsk, Paweł Adamowicz, was assassinated like that. And recently, the attack of Mr. Fico is exactly similar kind of the situation. So they are somehow sharpening the knives, which after can go, in their own breast.
How about now? Do you feel safer in Poland when you?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. I'm still being criticized by different politicians, even the new politicians I was voted for. And some part of the population are spreading on the internet some unpleasant commentaries about myself, but the atmosphere is different, and I don't believe. I'm also meeting so much of the support, the signs of support and sympathy, that I feel safe in Poland now.
Dzirdējāt sarunu ar poļu režisori Agņešku Holandu, kuras filma Zaļā, robeža īsu brīdi skatām uz kino ekrāniem Latvijā. Raidījumu veidoja Zane Ozoliņa un Reinis Budze.
Uzķēršam, preparējam, aizšujam. Tāda ir mēdīju anatomija.